The Trump Taj Mahal opened in Atlantic City on April 2, 1990. Billed by its developer as the eighth wonder of the world, it was the largest casino in the world at the time of its opening. A $1 billion complex of towers, domes, and minarets on the Atlantic City boardwalk that had consumed more construction financing than any casino project in American history to that point. Donald Trump had staked his personal financial reputation, his corporate credit, and the collateral of his entire real estate portfolio on a project whose debt service requirements were so extreme that the casino needed to generate approximately $1 million per day in revenue simply to cover its interest obligations. It filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 11 months after opening. The carpets in several areas of the property had not yet been fully installed when the filing occurred. The chandeliers that had been ordered for the main gaming floor had not all arrived. The project that Trump had called the greatest casino ever built was restructured in bankruptcy court before it had completed its first year of operation, under a debt load that independent analysts had identified as unsustainable before the opening ribbon was cut. The forensic entry point for this case is not the bankruptcy itself. Every case file in this channel's archive has documented a bankruptcy or its functional equivalent. The forensic entry point is the specific mechanism by which a project whose financial non-viability was documented in the public record before its opening was nevertheless financed, constructed, and opened by a combination of junk bond markets, creditor optimism, and personal brand authority that overrode the arithmetic that any conventional credit analysis would have stopped at the term sheet stage. The Trump Taj Mahal is not a story about a casino that failed. It is a story about a capital structure that was never designed to succeed in the conventional sense, assembled by a developer whose relationship with debt had been shaped by a decade of real estate transactions in which the scale of the borrowing was itself the primary instrument of leverage, and whose Atlantic City ambitions had outgrown the capacity of any rational debt service analysis to contain them. If this is your first case file from this channel, subscribe now, because every episode adds one more layer to what you are about to understand about the architecture of institutional failure. The Trump Taj Mahal was financed through a combination of sources that reflected the specific characteristics of the late 1980s capital markets rather than the specific characteristics of the casino project being built. The primary financing vehicle was a junk bond offering that raised approximately $675 million from institutional and retail investors who were purchasing securities backed by the projected cash flows of a casino that had not yet opened. In a market whose competitive dynamics were already being reshaped by the simultaneous opening of multiple new Atlantic City casino properties that were competing for the same gaming revenue pool, the covenant structure embedded in the junk bond indenture required the Taj Mahal to generate cash flow sufficient to service interest payments on $675 million in high-yield debt at rates that reflected the risk premium the market had demanded for a project of this scale, complexity, and developmental history. Those interest payments required the casino to perform at a revenue level that the Atlantic City gaming market of 1990 could not support. Not because Atlantic City was failing as a market, but because the number of casinos competing for Atlantic City's gaming revenue had expanded faster than the revenue pool itself, and because the Taj Mahal's share of that pool, while substantial, was not sufficient to service the debt that had been used to build it. The covenant that nobody read carefully enough was the one that specified what would happen to the debt service requirement if the Atlantic City gaming market did not grow at the rate the projection models had assumed. The answer was documented in the market data available at the time of the bond offering. The market was not growing fast enough to support the Taj Mahal's debt service at any realistic market share. The projections that had justified the bond offering treated the Taj Mahal's opening as a net addition to Atlantic City's gaming revenue rather than as a redistribution of existing gaming revenue among a larger number of competing properties. That distinction between net market growth and market share redistribution is the forensic core of the Taj Mahal case. The casino opened. It generated significant gaming revenue. It generated insufficient gaming revenue to service the debt that had been assembled to build it, for the specific reason that the debt had been sized to net market growth projections in a market that was delivering market share redistribution. At what point does a developer's personal brand authority override the arithmetic of a credit analysis that the market data does not support? Leave your analysis in the comments below. The financial projections prepared in connection with the Trump Taj Mahal junk bond offering treated the casino's stabilized gaming revenue as a function of two inputs: the total Atlantic City gaming market revenue and the Taj Mahal's projected market share of that revenue. Both inputs were modeled optimistically in ways that the public data available at the time of the offering did not support. The total Atlantic City gaming market revenue projection assumed a growth trajectory that the market had not sustained in the 3 years preceding the offering, and that the simultaneous opening of multiple competing properties made structurally more difficult to achieve. The Atlantic City gaming market had reached a point of competitive saturation in which new supply was not creating new demand, but was fragmenting existing demand among more properties. The Taj Mahal's opening added the largest casino in the world to a market that was already operating multiple large-scale competing facilities, each of which would be required to compete more aggressively for the same pool of gaming visitors in response to the Taj Mahal's arrival. The Taj Mahal's projected market share was the more consequential error. The projection assumed that the casino's scale, its amenity package, and its brand association with Donald Trump would allow it to capture a market share disproportionate to its floor space relative to the competitive set. That assumption was not unreasonable in isolation. The Taj Mahal was genuinely larger, more spectacular, and more heavily capitalized than its Atlantic City competitors, and its Trump brand association did attract gaming visitors who were drawn specifically to the property's scale and celebrity. The error was in the magnitude of the premium the projection assigned to those advantages, a premium that would have required the Taj Mahal outperform its competitive set by margins that no casino in any market had ever sustained over a projected stabilization period. The independent casino industry analysts who reviewed the Taj Mahal's financial projections in the context of the junk bond offering produced assessments that characterized the revenue assumptions as aggressive to the point of implausibility. Those assessments were available to investors. They were not sufficient to prevent the bond offering from being oversubscribed. The yield that the junk bonds offered was high enough to attract capital from investors who were pricing the Trump brand as a risk mitigant that the arithmetic of the projection did not justify. If the forensic analysis this channel conducts is changing how you read real estate headlines, the like button is how the algorithm knows to send this case file to the next analyst who needs it. Donald Trump's public statements about the Trump Taj Mahal in the period between the junk bond offering and the Chapter 11 filing constitute one of the most precisely documented examples of institutional denial in this channel's case file archive. Trump described the casino as the greatest building ever built, as a project that would transform Atlantic City, and as a financial success that its critics had been wrong to doubt, in statements made to the press, to investors, and to the Atlantic City Gaming Commission in the months during which the casino's operating performance was demonstrating, week by week, that the debt service requirements could not be met from the revenue the gaming floor was generating. The architecture of this denial has a specific structural feature that distinguishes it from the denial documented in the Fontainebleau, the Plaza, and the Waldorf cases. It was not the denial of information that was unavailable or ambiguous. The Taj Mahal's revenue shortfall relative to its debt service requirements was visible in the weekly gaming reports that New Jersey regulators required casinos to file. The gap between actual performance and required performance was not a projection or an estimate. It was a documented fact, published in regulatory filings, available to any party who chose to read them. The denial in this case was therefore not a failure of information, but a failure of response. The choice to continue asserting that the casino's financial model was viable in the face of regulatory data that documented its non-viability with the precision that the projections used to sell the junk bonds had never achieved. That choice was rational from the perspective of a developer who had structured his personal financial obligations in a way that made the casino's bankruptcy a restructuring of corporate debt rather than a personal financial catastrophe, and whose public brand was sufficiently resilient to survive a Chapter 11 filing that would have been professionally terminal for a less prominently positioned developer. The Taj Mahal's bankruptcy was, from Trump's perspective, a negotiating position rather than a failure. The creditors who held the junk bonds received restructured securities. Trump retained an equity stake in the reorganized entity. The casino reopened under the same flag. The developer who had built the eighth wonder of the world with other people's money retained an interest in it after those people's money had been restructured at a loss. The Trump Taj Mahal filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy a total of 4 times between 1991 and 2014, a frequency of financial restructuring that no other casino property in American history has matched, and that establishes the Taj Mahal as the most repeatedly bankrupt major hospitality asset in this channel's case file archive, exceeding even the Plaza Hotel's 3 bankruptcy proceedings that Case File 002 documented. The 4 filings span a 23-year period during which the Atlantic City gaming market underwent the structural decline that the original projection models had not priced. The legalization of gaming in neighboring states progressively reduced the geographic captive market that had been Atlantic City's primary competitive advantage, and the introduction of online gaming further compressed the revenue pool that Atlantic City's physical casinos competed for. The Taj Mahal closed permanently on October 10, 2016, after the bankruptcy estate determined that no viable path to continued operation existed under the market conditions that had developed since the 2014 filing. The building was sold, the gaming equipment was auctioned, and the boardwalk property that had been the largest casino in the world stood vacant for several years before Hard Rock International acquired the site and opened a new casino hotel on the Taj Mahal's foundation in 2018. What the Trump Taj Mahal case reveals about the broader pattern of institutional failure that this channel documents is the specific risk created when personal brand authority is used as a substitute for conventional credit analysis in the underwriting of a capital structure that the market data does not support. Every other case file in this archive has documented an ownership that believed its market analysis was correct at the time of acquisition. The Taj Mahal documents a project in which the market analysis was contradicted by available data before the ink on the bond documents was dry, and in which the contradiction was overridden by a combination of investor yield hunger and developer brand authority that the conventional gatekeeping mechanisms of the capital markets failed to constrain. The junk bonds that financed the eighth wonder of the world were restructured in bankruptcy before the carpets were fully installed. The creditors who bought them received less than par. The developer who issued them retained an equity interest. The boardwalk is still there. The building is not. If this case file changed how you evaluate the role of personal brand authority in capital structure design, subscribe to this channel, because the next case examines a building whose brand authority was institutional rather than personal, and whose collapse was proportionally more catastrophic for exactly that reason. And in the comments, given the publicly available Atlantic City gaming market data that contradicted the Taj Mahal's revenue projections before the bond offering closed, what specific underwriting standard would have prevented the junk bond market from financing a capital structure that the market data did not support? The case file is open.